Hello and welcome to a broadcast from LaRouche Pack Television. I have in the studio Lyndon LaRouche, Diane Sayer, and Rachel Brown. We also have hooked up over video Summer Shields, Keisha Rogers, and Dave Christie, and Bill Roberts from Michigan. And I think as we meet here yet again, as the weeks go by, the circumstances get increasingly dangerous. And we really are at a moment at which the entire American population, or large portions of it, could just be wiped out. I mean, this week, we are poised on with an earthquake danger on the Pacific coast. We had these freak snowstorms in the Pacific Northwest. We've had unseasonable tornadoes. You have the threat of a famine coming up in the spring. We had another near miss of an asteroid just last Friday. We've got the increasing danger of war and then the collapse of the entire monetary system. And I think the point is that you have the British Empire. It still exists. They're out for depopulation, and it's the smallness, it's the littleness of the American population that could get us all killed. And as you said yesterday, at a time when the majority has failed, it's time that a minority, even a very small minority, has to take power. And that's what we're here to discuss today.
We ourselves have changed things a bit in the past week by what was done out of the basement and what we put on the record in terms of the weekly report on Thursday afternoon and evening. This has changed everything, and it means that everything we say and do changed too, or should have changed too. In other words, what we did in that practically 1 hour webcast, that did it. That changed everything that we do because we're taking charge. And that was the significance of this week. And obviously with the performance we've had in the past week, that means that we've got to get on this case of the mass kill question and things like that in terms of forms of life. We've got to get on that and make that the number one thing which leads all the other things that we state. Because this is it. We're talking about the threat of an extinction of a great number of human beings. If the present policy of this government and some other governments, and as in Europe, continue to do what they're doing, you're going to see mass killing of Americans, even without thermonuclear weapons, just from starvation and from other kinds of problems of this type. So what we did on Thursday afternoon and put on site is the starting point of everything we say and do in this coming week and this weekend. That's what it has to be, because what we have here is this. You have people that are going along to get along. That's the mentality of the population. They're scared, they're frightened, they're confused, and so forth. And also we've had 3 generations of people where each generation is poorer in quality as a generation than the preceding one. In other words, we're on a downward slide in the quality of minds and emotions of the people of the United States counted off from the time that Truman took over as president. And now we've come to the bottom of the line. People are influenced. They react to what they call reality. They react to what they think is public opinion, on the basis of a degeneration of public opinion, which has been going on for 3 generations. Therefore, the only solution to a situation like this is not the old college try. The thing here is to get with it. The issue is we're faced with a crisis of humanity, which can only be cured by our recognizing that the thing that was responsible for the great kills of up to 98% of all living processes in the past 500 million years on this planet was the people who were doing what the citizens are doing today in their non-performance, is what killed all those species, 98% of them, which didn't survive because they were failures. And the problem of the American population now is not the campaigners as much. They're a problem too. But the problem is the American citizenry themselves have accepted a degeneration process of 3 generations, 3 degenerations. And we have to realize that we don't go with the flow, because the flow is coming from where you know where, and it's not pleasant. What we've done now, which you have to understand with great attention and great specificity, you've got to understand what we did as a preliminary presentation, but an adequate summary. What we did on the performance yesterday is what you have to study, understand, and apply in the field and every place. Don't try to keep it simple. Don't try to play down to public opinion. Don't try to be the good guy who everybody likes because you say only things that they want to hear. You've got to tell them the things they don't want to hear, because it's only the things that they don't want to hear which can save their lives and can save this nation. So it's a new situation. And what Sky led in doing, but all of us participated in that particular webcast this past Thursday afternoon, what we did then, changed the policy of the organization in every way, including in the field. Because no longer are we going to go by the facts which have occurred. We're going to go by the realities which have not occurred and which should have occurred. And to tell the people that their leaders are wrong, they're stupid, or cowardly, that's the truth of the matter. We're acting like a species, the way Sky described this process on Thursday. And we all agree with it. It's true. We have the scientific evidence to back it up. We're dealing with a place where the human species, as we know it now, in the transatlantic region, is a species which is doomed to extinction for the same reason that all the other creatures that deserved extinction became extinct. The fact is, as Sky emphasized, no species that actually had a reason to live died out. The only species that disappeared were the ones that were not fit to survive. And they were not fit to survive because they did the same old once too often. And therefore, what we have to do is we have to get on top of the situation. We have to realize there's no competence out there in general in the political institutions of the United States. And we have to destroy that incompetence. We have to attack that incompetence. Because people say, well, we're getting by, we have to do this and all that sort of thing. We now come to the point that unless we do this, as Sky's particular report on this subject that defines it very nicely, and we all agreed with it, the facts are all there, the evidence is all there. If we continue to function as we often do in trying to go with the flow, to engage with popular opinion, when popular opinion is always wrong, especially now. And it's going against popular opinion, but not by just going against it, but pointing out how stupid it is. Pointing out that this, and we'll use the example that Sky used, and we're going to use a more refined version of that in our coming reports. We're going to go with that line and that scientific explanation of why the human species, called the Americans in particular, are doomed unless they change their ways. And stop thinking about voting for any of these clowns, which is either a Republican clown or a Democratic clown. Because if you try to go with those clowns and appeal to the people who are supporting those clowns, you just bring on the death of the human species, or something like that. And therefore we have to change our style to provide actual leadership. I know some of you have been doing it, but we've got to get the entire organization doing it. Because you have some people who are doing it, but others aren't. And it's that difference that's killing us. I don't think we're going to die, but the point is we have to go through this thing and look at it in these terms, or we're not going to make it. That the way the performance out in the field this week was not effective in that past 2 weeks. And it was not effective because precisely for the lack of something. And the lack of something was the need to proceed not from trying to please people, but to get them enraged against themselves for being such damn fools. And that means people who are suffering, who are being abused, but who just aren't fighting. The species that will live is a species that fights. The species that will live in a mass kill in life forms is a species that didn't go along with the crowd. And the little mouse, or the little mouse-like creature, watched the mighty dinosaurs die. And so it's good. It's not bad to be a little mouse-like creature if you've got the guts in you to survive and the qualities in you to survive. But that we're going to have to do that now because the situation is such that there's no room for toleration of anything that any of these Republicans have said or anything that the Democratic Party has said, leadership has said. They're all incompetent. They're all a species type which went out with the last great kill. And they went out because they were no longer useful, just like the dinosaurs. Lumbering, stupid, incompetent, and they died. While little mouse-like creatures, the future species of the planet, vigorously moved ahead and fought that way all the way. So be a little mouse that's fighting all the way through. Take charge of this environment and let the old dinosaurs die out. Have fun.
This past week, I issued a statement along with Dave Christie, and this statement was a warning of the potential for an earthquake disaster along the Pacific Rim of Fire, with focusing in on the danger that a potential major earthquake posed on the west coast of the United States. And in this, what I expressed was that we have to contact immediately the emergency services that would be involved in protecting the American people. And that if we look at this from the standpoint, the reiteration of this forecast came precisely from the basement research team that's in question here, which was it came directly out of a recognition that the sun was acting up, that you had a series of solar flares, sunspots facing the Earth. You had 3 major coronal mass ejections, 2 of which hit the Earth right on. You had a sudden correlation of an increase in earthquake activity across the Pacific Rim of Fire. You had 4 6.0 earthquakes or higher that hit. And so essentially we're sitting ducks here, and that any American citizen should take this threat extremely seriously, recognize that there are the precautions that must be taken. I've already begun, and our team here has already begun contacting the emergency services that should respond to this, and that in effect, if we get any more information about a potential epicenter of this earthquake, then we would commence perhaps the most historic large-scale evacuation that's ever been done of any major city center that lies in the path. Those are short-term solutions. The long-term solution is what's been proposed twice by Russia. First, Russia has proposed the strategic defense of the Earth, which is a policy that would include cooperation between the major space agencies of the various nations involved. That would mean Roscosmos in Russia. It would mean NASA in the United States. It would mean funding this to allow for a comprehensive network of cooperation between the various space agencies on satellite technology to begin to measure what's known as earthquake precursors, changes in the electromagnetic field, the changes in the ionosphere, potential changes in the electromagnetic field around a potential epicenter. And secondly, the proposal that came from Russia as well, shortly after your State of the Union the week before last, which was cooperation around a joint moon base construction to begin a process of what mankind has to do permanently, the endless frontier, as it's been termed by the basement research team, that we have to begin the construction of a moon base as a first step towards mankind's endless frontier into space, which would start with a move in a week to Mars as a necessary part of mankind's evolution. These are sitting here as proposals. What we know, and Dave will comment on this, what we already know is that whether you take the environmentalists who start out with an extremely pessimistic view of humanity, that anything mankind touches is going to be bad, or whether or not you start out with the current list of Republican candidates who are saying that mankind cannot determine its own future, that you cannot in any way shape or control the destiny of humanity without destroying the so-called free market. You got to cut back, and unless you decide to actually go with a Glass-Steagall solution and go with the national bank and then begin to seize our own destiny, there's no way for us to overcome a potential mass extinction. And in the short term, the threat of in the next week, of a major earthquake hitting a major city center on the Pacific coast of the United States, there's no way to avoid an immediate disaster, an immediate danger.
Okay, that's all fine. We've done that before. I agree totally. But it doesn't go to the point I made. The point is, the problem lies, see, you say something to a public. You say the thing to the public. It's correct. It's what it should be necessarily put across. Why doesn't it work instantly? It doesn't work because you got a problem inside the population, inside 3 generations, which have been 3 degenerations. And the point is, when you say these things to some guy out there are only a few people who will actually respond to that, no matter how many times you say it. Now, how do you break that point? What you have to do is you have to take this large population and seek out people who will give a certain kind of response. It's sort of like the Gideon's army. Those who drink and don't one way and don't, the Gideon story. That what you have looking for people who are going to respond to what? We're going to give a presentation, which is what Sky led in presenting on Thursday. But he's going to be more refinement in that because we're very happy about what happened that time. This was a real job done, well done. And it was crucial because it settled the question. What species is fit to live? And what are the qualifications of the species that is fit to live? You've got to address not at the audience. You've got to address personally inside the audience. Because you're not looking for recruiting everybody. You're looking to recruit those who, out of a sense of guilt and joy mixed together, will say to you, you're right, that's what's wrong with me. And I'm not going to be like that. And it's that cadre you form out of those selected people that you address in that way that's going to give you the response in the population as a whole. It's always a tiny minority of the population that leads in a situation like this. We tell them the truth, they pay no attention, or they make excuses. They don't respond. So just telling them the facts is not going to impress them. It will impress some people in a certain way. But the crucial question is, what's wrong with this population that it puts up with these crazy idiots we call members of Congress? This brainless idiot we have called as a president. How do we address the fact that the population is defective? We point out the defects in the situation. Why don't we point out the defects in the population we're addressing? Now, to do that, it's like good teaching. What you do is you say, well, this didn't work for this reason, and here's why it didn't work. Let me tell you the story. Why the dinosaurs died. And you have it right already, what Sky gave on Thursday. Exactly that. You have to say that, exactly that, to that audience out there. Now, only a few will respond the way we intend. But it's those few who do respond the way we intend which enable us to get a victory. So we're trying to recruit troops. We're testing those who are qualified for warfare. And when we get the ones that are qualified for warfare, we train them. We encourage them. And they do the rest of training the other people. So we have to go for a minority of people who will respond and build up a threnody which gets these guys to become running with us, not people that support us, but people who join our effort and feel happy to do so. Like we've done on the question of the NWAPA program. We reached out, we got the cadre. They didn't take much convincing once we went through it. And we have to take this cadre recruiting approach where we tell them what's wrong with the way they're thinking and what the correction is, and tell them why that's wrong and why the correction has to be made. And the ones that are smart enough to get that will not be let go. They will not let themselves go. And what we have to do is use this video with the follow-up videos we're doing on the same subject and use that as the lead edge of our entire propaganda program, our entire recruiting program, not other issues. Because you can, once you get them in and you find out they're ready to go that direction, then you continue your conversation and go right then into the great kill business. What species are fit to live? What are the qualifications of a species that is fit to live under these kinds of conditions? How do you stop being a dinosaur? Don't think like a dinosaur. Don't go out and try to tell the dinosaur, oh, you're a dinosaur, I want to recruit you. And you want to say, no. Well, if you're a dinosaur, you're not going to make it. And there's nothing I can do for you. I'm sorry. Goodbye.
You know, Lynn, I think what was presented there by Sky, and will be elaborated and so on, that's at the core of every one of the policies that we're putting forward. In other words, these are not some assembly of initiatives, Glass-Steagall, Mars program, national credit, so on and so forth, that we're out there as a kind of a poster of propaganda, and we're asking people to check boxes next to our poster of propaganda, but that all of these policies flow from this underlying, what was presented in Sky's presentation, which is essentially the universal demand of progress or die, and that is not an optional feature, and therefore how are we going to increase the energy flux density? How are we going to do what the biosphere does that mankind has to do in an economic process, but has to do as a willful process? And so when you take it from that standpoint, then all of the policies flow from there. And I know that in terms of the field work in particular, we'll have scenarios, right? So I remember just the other day, woman charged up saying, yes, I want to sign up, and starts signing up and says, wait a second, this isn't for Glass-Steagall. I said, well, look, if you want Glass-Steagall, you're going to have to get Obama out. And she started backing away, and she didn't even see that next to the Glass-Steagall sign was a picture of Obama with a Hitler mustache. So there's this way where this population will want to take little particular parts of a program and think that they can just still incorporate those parts of their program underneath their own program. So we're going out there, and if we're just sitting here presenting our list of elements of a program, and we hope it jives with part of your list of elements of a program, instead of attacking the underlying reality of why they can't see the full picture, that even if they think that there's one element that they like of what we think, but they want to hold on to their own axioms of environmentalism, of monetarism, that will drag them down and not even allow them to get what they think they want. And I think we got that core of that, the universal demand of progress or die, that has to be just driven into them or flank them to get them to see that.
That's precisely true, but then the question is, what is the actual form of the successful approach to that, doing that? What you really want to do is we're going to have to take things like we're producing these videos, right? And we take the video that we did on Thursday. The basic argument is there. Now, Sky and the rest of us would like to, in a sense, give an enhanced version of that, because the point is buried in there, and Sky's argument at one point made the core argument that the killing of dinosaurs, the point, remember, that he made, the killing of the dinosaurs, the death of the dinosaurs and similar species, it occurred because they were not fit to live, because they were not willing to progress, where the little mouse-like creature did and became the triumphant species on the planet. Now, what we need to do is take that aspect of it, which was what Sky really presented. That was his real presentation on that occasion. And take that, and we want to present that same argument repeatedly with all the excerpts in it, so you get a contact and you want to get them to go to the site, go to the site and see that and study it and then call back and talk about it. In other words, you want to do a direct recruitment by an educational process, not throwing facts at them, but by getting them engaged in recognizing that what they were told by everybody was a lie. Anyone who said that these were kill operations, in other words, that each one of these disasters was a disaster for the living species, is not true. What happened is the system dumped a species that was not fit to exist. And the ones that were fit to exist were the ones who were going with change, forward change, and say, well, look, we're going to die now. If we keep voting for these candidates that you're talking about out there, we're all going to die. And we're going to die because you're sticking with those candidates. There is no candidate running for president now who's fit for anything. Dog catchers would sneer at them. It's not worth arresting. The point is here, is you have to get this pedagogical approach in, which means you've got to get people set up to go through the whole business. We have to have the video available to people to pull down if they've got accessibility. And we have to find out who on there is obviously catching what we're talking about, that this is a fundamental discovery in science, in physical science. And that has to be presented as a fundamental discovery in physical science, which you give to any person who wants to hear it and who understands what they're talking about. In other words, you want to have a real pedagogical relationship between the person you're talking about. So you've got to find the person who you would want to talk to them about this, and then use our video productions, which we need for that purpose, and present them concise excerpts of the argument so they can follow the ABCs together with pictures, with diagrams, illustrations. And do that so we concentrate in a way where you have a selective process. You're first to find out who is going to be potentially a performer as a leader, one who can educate other people. When you find out the person that could educate them, you try to make sure they get the point clear and provide them with the access to the materials they need to have in order to follow up on what they've learned and act on it. And then use those people that you get in that to become the basis for recruiting more people. You want people in society, 2s and 3s and 4s, beginning to gather around one person there who does understand the point. They spread it to other people, and some people are just curious about what's going on, and then you point them to the same thing. And that's the only way you're going to succeed now. Any other approach, just on giving facts, is not going to win. Because in this case, you can't win this population if you just give facts. You've got to actually educate them, their minds actively in going through a kind of thinking they have not done before. In other words, rather than trying to address the way they think and convince them on the basis of that they should change their opinion, is not going to work. But however, if you educate them with something which they realize is new, is revolutionary, and changes everything, that's what you want. And you're not going to succeed in this operation unless you do that.
Well, along those lines, I mean, one of my favorite graphs that Sky used that we have here, where he shows the difference between in energy consumption between amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Well, you look at it, and the mammals go up at a different rate than the birds. And I was thinking, well, where are the humans? Aren't humans more energy dense than birds? And it does get to this question of Hamilton and credit and economy, because what we have done, and you see why we're facing extinction also, because we've reversed it. But what we had done with the discovery of first combustion, burning wood, burning coal, fission, eventually fusion, is that you can increase the energy consumption of human beings at a hyperbolic, non-linear rate.
Well, you have to go to another level, one other qualification. You can't do it by putting non-human beings in the same category as human beings.
Right.
Because the human being is the only one that is capable of creative thinking. The only one. No animal can. No species can. Only the human species can do this. Therefore, you have to, first of all, if you're going to talk to somebody, make sure it's a member of the human species. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful.
Right.
But the point is, what we have to do is we have to get away from this pragmatic approach to education. We have to now, we're in a crisis. This is the year. The year is moving fast. We could all be extinct in a short period of time. Therefore, you cannot use the gradual methods. And you cannot use slam dunk methods either. What you have to do is you have to have where you get this quiet moment, which is internally turbulent, where people are going through an experience in which everything they believe is being overturned as the words drop from your mouth. Now, only certain kinds of people can respond that way. Other people demand creating an aura of popular opinion around a person. So therefore, what you have to do first, you have to find the nuclei of recruitment, which doesn't mean you're going to recruit them as such. You're not even trying to do that. You're trying to convince them that you've given them a discovery of a scientific principle in that way, not a description, not a piece of advertising, not a commentary, but actually changing their soul fast by showing them that everything suddenly they see is what you're presenting to them. As the words drop from your mouth and the visions drop from their tube, they're going through a change where everything they believe is suddenly being changed with a few sentences and some audio-visual material. We have the ability to do this with the video productions that we're doing from the basement. Right? And we now know, particularly with what Sky emphasized on Thursday, that one point, that single point, that the kills all came to animals who behave like citizens do today. And you get that point across in a scientific way. So it means you have to get them actually at the point where, well, I've got something to say. It may be difficult, but look at this. And you've got to pick out the guy or the woman who you think is going to respond in that way. And you say, well, look, you seem to understand what I'm getting at. And we have this video. It's up there. You have access to video. And you want them to look at something which is fairly short, abbreviated, because to concentrate their attention span. Once they get the point that we are making a revolution, that species of animals that behave the way our citizens today are behaving are going extinct. Our citizens are going to go extinct if they continue to behave this way. So we have to save our fellow citizens who would go extinct if we don't change their minds about how they're going to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Therefore, we need to we have to have a concise effort here, where we induce the producers of our video material to recognize that our audience out there needs something very specific, which corresponds to what we're putting up as a video production, but we're making small packages of this, which is what we present to somebody on the other end of the television line. They look at that, and they get the idea that you mean that we human beings, we citizens, are like the dinosaurs and we're about to go extinct because of the way we're thinking and behaving? That's the one you want to get across. And that's the only way we can succeed. And it will work. But we just have to have this thing glued together. We have to get the relationship between the person who's talking to the citizen and ourselves in this special mode. And you have to start with the people who are more capable of responding and understanding what we're talking about. Once they get the image where they're compared, we'll have to produce a video to do this, to show a human being acting like a dinosaur, as opposed to a human being acting like a human being. And this kind of thing is what we need, because you've got to get to really not talking at people. You've got to get under their skins, into their souls. with a kind of educational process which they suddenly realize that they've just had an experience which has changed their life. And that's the way we organize.
Right. A teacher that I was speaking with in New York actually went through this because he said, you know, I have a few problem kids in my class, and they are actually children whose parents are either alcoholics or drug addicts who are being raised by their grandparents. And I realized that the next generation will have no one. He said, I can see that we could be in a dark age immediately, virtually, because the grandparents are going to die off. They're already taking care of 2 generations down the line. Their children are a disaster, so that you have no one who will take responsibility for the next generation.
Great. What we have to do is we have to produce from our base here, we have to produce actually a presentation of that whole concept. Here's what's wrong with the way people out there are thinking. Here's what the typical voter who's stupid enough to vote for Republicans is doing. Huh? And these 2 words like that. Huh? Or you look at the Republican candidates. None of them are fit. None of them are, what they're doing now, has done so far, are fit to be elected. They're a drag on society. The Democrats aren't doing anything. The Democrats are trying to, hatch eggs that are not eggs. They're sitting on a rock and thinking it's an egg they're going to hatch.
Whirling pumpkins.
Right, exactly. So the point is, we need this kind of educational approach, not the so-called standard pitch, which even we do. We tend to throw things at the people. We don't get inside their skins. We try to provoke them on issues, and you cannot provoke them on issues. You cannot win them on issues. And issues by itself will not work. They will look at it, they'll stare at it, they'll comment on it. They seem to like the idea of receiving this information, but they won't do a damn thing about it. So you've got to make sure that they're going to do a damn thing about it. And the only way you're going to do that is get at this way, is a real clinical way to say, this is why we're being destroyed. It is our citizens themselves who unwittingly are destroying themselves, their nation and themselves. And when they vote for these candidates, you know they're destroying themselves. That kind of thing. And we need educational material to go out on the site, which above and all this business of reporting on things at the audience. We've got to avoid getting dragged into the at the audience approach. We have to get deeply under the skin, and we have to address the mental processes inside the citizen you're addressing. We can do that, but it means we're going to have to redesign what we're producing for the website. Is going to have to include a repertoire which contains this kind of material as opposed to what we're doing now. And Sky's argument, which was the core of our presentation on Thursday, got at that specific point. And we had a discussion the night before in the basement. And he started to talk about this, and I said, I know exactly what you're going to be talking about. And they said, okay, that's it. I said, let's do it. So we did it. And this is what we have to do. We have to make this change in the procedure. But it's obvious. It's what we would like to have done to us. You want to do to others as you would like them to do to you, right? Okay, fine.
Yeah,
So
I think,
so let's do it.
well, challenge that argument made in there absolutely obliterates environmentalism as the core ideology of it, which frankly is the same ideology of monetarism. And it's the same world outlook. But I think one of the things that I've come across in terms of the organizing is when you get to the core of this environmentalism, and you see that the emotional incapacity to actually act on behalf of saving mankind. I mean, you can present the problems that are faced around the starvation issues. You can present all the afflictions of mankind, even something as horrible as thermonuclear war. And there's always this edge of an inability to emotionally connect because of this underlying ideology, which at the core, if you think that there's too many people on this planet, then why would you ever move to act with the kind of passion that is needed to prevent the problems that are coming down on us right now. So I think it's just, if we can't obliterate this ideology and not only just simply attack it, but to present, what is the actual nature of the universe, what is the actual nature of mankind, then it's not going to matter. So I think just getting at that core is just absolutely crucial at this point.
Yeah, so what a lot of people respond to when they have their pessimism about why we can't do anything, and they say, this person runs the bank and these people control Congress, and that is all sense perceptions. From what Dave just brought up, they're not responding to the fact that the nature of the universe is creative, as was laid out. And once you understand that, none of that stuff matters, because it'll these extinct species will be wiped out or whatnot, but those things don't matter.
We can do it. I think we've just got to take this through among ourselves here and there and get other people to understand that we have a need for this kind of product to go out on the website in all kinds of shapes and sizes to fit the needs of what we think is the person on the other end of the line. In other words, the main thing is to show that the whole environment, as he points out, right, he's right, that emphasis, to point out that this environmentalist movement is really what? Is the dinosaurs dying. If you are a greenie, you're a dinosaur and you're about to go extinct. And make the point. Why the dinosaurs died. Why did the dinosaurs die? This was not a mass kill of the species. It was a survival of the species that were fit to continue to live. And it was entirely voluntary on the part of all these species. The species that died because they wanted to die, or they wanted the behavior which would cause them to die, go extinct. Whereas the human being, and what human beings became, is a triumphant species of the planet. We don't want to start imitating and talking about how animals behave. We want to talk about how human beings are supposed to behave. And that human beings have to be creative. And if you're not creative, well, you're not a human being, or you're not behaving like a human being. And that's the whole point. And we've got to do this because what I'm seeing is anything that's really descriptive does not do the job for us. You've got a population which is sinking deeply into demoralization. And you cannot try to say, appeal to them on their own level. You've got to give them a kick in the butt and raise their level thereby.
Yeah, Lynn, I think the way that this can come across, if we're doing it correctly, is just a total change in reference, in frame of reference for the people we're talking to. Because what's happening right now is most people are trying to basically squeeze juice out of a rotten turnip or something like that with these candidates. And some people are realizing that, this stuff tastes horrible, but they don't know why, because they don't have the correct frame of reference. And this is something that Kraft Erica used to talk about in terms of why people get sucked into belief in environmentalism and all these beliefs about staying small. And he used to reference the embryo in its womb, thinking at 8 months of age, man, it's getting kind of cramped in here, and then making a projection and saying that maybe I should cut back, maybe I should just stop growing. And the baby doesn't realize that it's about to go through a dramatic transformation in its frame of reference. And I think that frame of reference right now that people have to get, if they're going to even be able to imagine the first step, is the moon and is Mars. Because even though right now we don't have a mining colony on the moon, and we're not there yet. But if we don't take that domain, at least the solar system, the galaxy, as our frame of reference, then anything that we try to do will be a collapse. And so it's a complete revolution in the sense that any revolution has been, and I think somehow that has to really be what kind of shatters people's sense of just going along with this crap that they're being subjected to.
Yeah, it's true, because it's not an option. What we're talking about in terms of the need and the must action, the need to take action immediately to go to space is not something that is whether or not you agree with it or not. It has to be done. This is what gets at the core of the survival of the fitness of human beings to survive mass extinction. And I think what you just brought up, Lynn, about the fact that we're not, and this is what was emphasized by Sky, we're not just talking about mass extinction, but we're talking about the introduction of new, more higher fit species. And it just reminds me of what you just had coming out of these Republican Party candidates for president. I mean, these guys are already as good as extinct. When you have, this caveman, Ron Paul, who's sitting there talking about, we don't need to go to the moon, and just talking about how we need to continue to go backwards in our development, or all of the rest of them who are saying, well, it's a nice idea, but we don't have the budget for it. This is, as Dave said, a direct action. I mean, it's directly related to the policies of environmentalism, but all of it's the same. It gets back to the core principle of this oligarchy who seeks to destroy the potential for real human creativity to exist. And so I think that's what we're dealing with right now in terms of, can we get the population, and this is where there can be no sugarcoating, or should I say no compromise with what must be done when you're dealing with the fact that you have unqualified leadership who is going along with the policy that will kill people, that is genocidal on both sides, both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, whether it's a greening policy or whether it's a free marketeer policy.
Well, I can bring something up in addition. We haven't discussed a whole lot of the specifics, but we've saw in the weekly report this transcendent process from one level of species going to a higher level of species, as you brought up, and what's important is the fact that there's a direction to that development. So we've seen it in the biosphere. It was demonstrated. I wanted to bring up a couple examples from the galaxy, from our basement paper that was just published on our website. Just briefly, so there's this question of redshift, which people generally assume says, well, redshift is based off of a distance, the light traveling of a distance from an object from you in space. So they'll judge objects in the sky according to their redshift as they appear. But what we've been finding is that a lot of objects in the sky don't correspond to this, and that objects that seem to be at very different distances are interacting with each other.
I think a lot of us are suspicious of the whole redshift proposition. It's a generalization which does not have parameters in it which tell you whether it's true or not.
Yeah, that's what we're finding.
Exactly to me. I mean, this whole redshift is a scandal. It's been bouncing around. When people run out of talk on any subject, they bring up the redshift.
Right. Well, what we're seeing again, just generally, is instead of that, is the fact that the galaxies appear to be developing, and maybe even giving birth to other galaxies. We're seeing galaxies in different stages of development. I think, and so it's
that's the obvious question, which we infer from everything we know about the galaxy we deal with and working outward. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's going on that we don't have any clue at all about. It's just except we don't understand it because we're not being given the evidence we can understand. We're going to have to get on to that. But we do have, in the relationship between our solar system and the galaxy, with this conspicuous operation here, that this thing is understandable. That part is understandable. So I think the wise thing is to stick to things that we can pioneer and know are reasonably understandable, which leave us room to discover that we made a mistake or two, rather than taking a big sweeping gesture and trying to encompass everything with a single big sweeping gesture. I don't think we need to know that. We're talking about things which in terms of light years are billions of years away, among other things. So I think we could go out there and check it real quick. So I think that we have an approach that we're using. We are always correcting things. We're always coming in progress to new discoveries on everything front we're dealing with. And that every time we have a meeting in the basement, we actually tend to come up with something new. And so that's the way to go. That's where we are. We are on secure ground. We know what we're doing. There are a lot of things we don't know, and we're smart enough to know that we don't know. And that's the way it has to be. But the point is, it's just like this question we're dealing here with on people out there. We don't know all the answers. We do know that this whole story that's told about the kill of the dinosaurs is a complete myth. It has no correspondence to reality. The truth is that all the species that survived deserved to survive, and those that didn't. And sticking to those kinds of ideas that we know, we should know what we have to do next. We would like to know things that go much further than that. And we can go a certain distance in that direction successfully, and we can manage to get by temporarily on that basis. But we don't want to go into this idea of far-reaching thing to try to upset everything when you don't have an answer. If you ask a question for which you don't know an answer, and they don't know an answer, and then try to debate it, it's not very profitable.
Well, back on this environmentalism question, because that is really key now, because see, what people have been induced to believe in this environmentalist movement is exactly what will kill you. Because what you see in terms of, well, they describe it there as energy of the system, that you have this extinction, and then the next group of species consumes more energy, produces more energy, is more complex. It's the exact opposite of this insane, fraudulent second law of thermodynamics.
What you're getting is the actual, in this diagram, and I think it's a useful diagram that Sky came up with. This diagram shows you a process, which is the little black part there, right? That shows you that what's happening is not the death of the species that's occurring, the old species that's occurring. What's happening is the new species is taking over. And when you look at it in that way, which is what is actually happening, then this whole environmentalist argument about species, it dies. It's nonsense. It's absolute crap. There's no truth to it whatsoever.
Right.
It's typical British propaganda.
Exactly. And the truth is Malthus's line about how we grow geometrically and resources only arithmetically is a complete fraud in the face of the development of the biosphere and the universe.
Because the biggest factor in the development of the universe increasingly is mankind. Mankind is the generator of growth of living species. Look at just take the population of the planet. Look at the things that we human beings have done just by living, which have changed the planet and made it better. It's when we don't do those things that the planet gets into trouble. It's the environmentalists who are the enemies of civilization, the enemies of life. And
well, they're the palace guards, of the queen, defending the queen's policy. It reminds me a little of a kind of a Bettelheim syndrome, where they have adopted the identity of their oppressors. But again, it comes back. I just want to be clear on this. Unless you get to the root of this, and what you're bringing up with just this, we have to go to their minds, because here we sit on the verge of World War III, thermonuclear World War III. This crisis has not abated. We had people within the U.S. military that moved forward to put the skids on Obama, and factors within Israel that put the skids on Netanyahu, and so on. But the British just keep pushing for this because they need this war. They need the population reduction. But you just find in the population a kind of almost throwing hands up in the air, saying, well, there's nothing we can do. They're always going to screw us, this kind of attitude. And so I think there's a quality where we just have to dive in and organize their soul around what could be and say, and you have to fight this evil of what the British what the British Empire represents.
Right. What you have to do is think about what the oligarchy represents as satanic. And the oligarchy is literally satanic. And in fact, the British monarchy is satanic. And it dominates the planet. Today, I mean, for example, Wall Street. Wall Street is nothing but an extension of the British system. It's the enemy within the United States. Look at Africa. There's not a single part of Africa that has not been destroyed repeatedly by the British influence on Africa. One of the greatest crimes against an entire continent, the people of an entire continent, is Africa. Who does it? Well, we have some people from the United States who are called U.S., but they're actually British. They're known to me as British, but they're listed as American officials, but they're actually British officials with a cloak of American citizenship. But they are British. They're trained in British, they're raised in British, they're deployed in British. And what you have is absolute evil. And you might say that the satanic quality of the British is identified by the dinosaurs. Big, lumbering, stupid things, unfit to live, and trying to kill as many things as they can reach with their big tails or their jaws or something else. If you think of these things as these to be the same thing, that the British monarchy is of this nature, the dying dinosaurs, the last dinosaurs, and they're trying to take us with them.
Right.
And so therefore we have to simply assert the fact that, and I think what Sky did in making that presentation defined it precisely for us. It put it in exactly the kind of language which we can amplify somewhat for detail. But the core of his statement, the core of his argument, is precisely the case. And what he stated actually is what we've defined as a law of the universe. And we're acting on the basis of the law of the universe. And the law of the universe is, if you take the whole universe, say the past half billion years, you take that whole business, you find this is the principle. This is the principle. This is the principle of life and creativity. And it's on our side. And the British are on the other side. And that's what the fight's all about. It's not the British, it's the whole principle, the oligarchical principle. And the problem is that our religions have been dominated by the oligarchical principle. The idea of money itself. I mean, there is no value in money. There's no intrinsic value in money. Huh? There's in credit, yes. But what defines value in a credit system? Production. The net gain in production of output, the development of the increase of the power of mankind, the increase of the welfare of mankind. That's value, that's credit. Money is a parasite. And money was invented as a system by the oligarchical principle, by the old oligarchical systems, which came in with what were called empires. You have something called money. You declare that this money is value. Why is it called value? Because the oligarchy says it's value. And the oligarchy then says, we are the rulers, we control this, and you guys are going to be eaten. If you become in excess in numbers, we're going to kill you off. We're going to keep your numbers down. That's the oligarchical principle. That's what the British principle is. It's nothing but the old oligarchical principle. The same thing as the various ancient wars. Even like the Peloponnesian War was the same thing. It was an oligarchical feud of that type. And we have to recognize that distinction, that we represent a principle of existence, we human beings, which comes into a conscious form to do as a conscious agent what living processes otherwise do for themselves. Living processes are anitropic, but they don't have the wisdom to be able to invent, actually create. We human beings have otherwise the characteristics of animals, but we're different from animals because we have willfully creative powers. And the British are against people having willfully creative powers. They don't want progress. They want zero growth. They want environmentalism. And that is satanic, actually. And once the human species...
I think we're getting at the principle of willful, creative, anti-entropy. And I thought that was very beautiful how Sky expressed that in this Thursday's discussion.
Yeah.
And if you look at this level of growth in the chart on number 9, I mean, it's an expression of that, because the only way that we're going to effectively get to Mars, effectively actually transcend space and time and everything in relationship to what it's going to take to accomplish this goal, is only going to be done by the development of a fusion-based economy. And that fusion-based economy is an expression of a willful creative intervention into the universe. It is human beings actually putting forth an intervention into the process of what's already the ordering principles or the upshifts in the biosphere. And so if you look, I think that this is exactly what the oligarchy, this system, or should I say, I would say that it's an expression of what you're saying here. This is a credit system. This is the expression of the credit system, is this upshift in anti-entropic development of mankind, the intervention of mankind into the universe.
Exactly.
Well, I would just add, I like this image of the British Empire as the big lumbering dinosaur as they crash to their out of existence, crash to their extinction. And the idea of perhaps the little mouse off to the side, although I don't suggest we act like little mice, but the idea, I think, of the weak forces of this is a moment in history where by actually representing and pushing and getting somebody's soul to be organized around this principle and to see this, to make that kind of a breakthrough, I think that's the foundation of a renaissance. And that in a true form, these weak forces can take over as this thing crashes, as the British Empire crashes. And that, perhaps that's what it means of the idea, the meek shall inherit the earth. I think that we just got to recruit the souls as we watch this big dinosaur collapse.
Good.
Okay. I think that's well said. I think that's a good conclusion point for our discussion. So we'll have much more of this, and as you promised, we're going to have a lot of this pedagogical material on the website this week.
Essential.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have fun.